The last thing I remembered from 2026 was the sound a warehouse roof makes when it gives up. It was not a clean crack. It was a groan through steel, concrete dust, and burning insulation. My boots slid on wet decking. My left arm was locked around a boy who had stopped screaming because smoke had stolen his breath. My right hand was looped through a rescue line that should have held both of us if the anchor had not torn loose with the beam. Captain Wu shouted my name. I shouted back that I had him. Then the roof dropped. For one bright second I felt heat on my neck, the boy's ribs under my glove, and the old Santa scar in my knee twisting wrong. I remember thinking, stupidly, that if I survived this my station would never let me forget falling through another roof. White light opened beneath me, above me, through me. I hit cold mud hard enough to empty my lungs. No smoke. No warehouse. No sirens. No radio chatter. I rolled to my side, spat mud, and looked up into a sky split by dragons. One was blue as a thundercloud over the sea, long-bodied, antlered, and bright along every scale. Wind curled around it in blades. Rain hung in the air without falling. The other burned crimson from horn to tail, not with ordinary fire, but with a heat that made shadows bend away. They circled above terraced fields and a willow-lined stream, close enough that each beat of their coils hammered the mud flat. I had been in building collapses, chemical fires, highway pileups, and one nightclub stampede. None of that prepared my brain for two creatures the size of commuter trains trying to tear each other out of the weather. The Crimson Dragon clamped its jaws into the Azure Dragon's throat. The Azure Dragon answered by folding the wind into a crescent blade and driving it through the Crimson Dragon's chest. Their roars met in the valley and knocked people off their feet. People. That word snapped me back. A village lay below the terraces. Tiled roofs. Reed fences. Grain racks. Children running. Old men dragging a cart that had lost a wheel. A woman crouched over someone in the lane. It was not a battlefield on a screen. It was a place full of people who did not deserve to be crushed by the sky. The dragons fell. The Azure Dragon struck first, collapsing an irrigation bank and smashing through two houses at the edge of the village. The Crimson Dragon hit the fields beyond, carving a trench through rice and mud. Flame rolled out, but the grain did not burn. It steamed. The air smelled like rain on hot iron. My body moved before my thoughts caught up. That part was familiar. Disaster is simple for the first 10 seconds. Find air. Find victims. Stop the next death. I staggered toward the nearest screams. A roof beam had pinned an old man against a broken wall. His gray hair was full of plaster dust. A girl, maybe 17, had both hands around the beam and was trying to lift it by fury alone. She had a river reed knife at her belt and mud up to her knees. "Move your hands," I said. She stared at me like I had climbed out of a nightmare. I probably had. My turnout coat was torn, my helmet was gone, and my axe still hung from my belt. "Hands," I repeated, then pointed. That crossed whatever language problem should have killed us. She shifted. I jammed a hoe handle under the beam, set my shoulder, and lifted with my legs. The beam rose 2 inches. Pain ran up my back. "Pull him." She pulled. The old man slid free with a wet cry. I dropped the beam, checked his breathing, then his bleeding. Bruised ribs. Cut scalp. Bad knee twisted, but alive. Across the northern ridge, armed men were coming down between the pines. Not villagers. Soldiers. Lamellar armor under ash-gray cloaks. Spears, short bows, hooked blades. They moved with the clean hurry of men who expected no resistance worth naming. Behind them bounded shapes too low and too fast to be human. The old man saw them and went pale under the dust. He spoke words I could not understand, pointed at the soldiers, then the dragons, then drew a finger across his throat. I understood the warning, not the language. The girl looked from them to me. Her hands shook, but she tightened them on the beam as if she could use it as a club. The Azure Dragon opened one silver eye. Its head lay beyond the crushed irrigation ditch, larger than a house. Blood like blue light poured into the mud. "Touch my brow, stranger." The voice was inside my skull. Not heard. Placed there. I froze. The Crimson Dragon laughed from the smoking field. "Touch mine, little rescuer. I will make your bones worthy of your courage." "No," I said, because that was the first honest answer. The soldiers were closer. One pointed toward the dragons. Another pointed toward the village. The low shapes beside them began to run. The old man grabbed my sleeve, pointed at the dragon wounds, the iron collars on the running shapes, and then at the approaching hunters. He mimed something being torn out and forced into a body. Whatever the details were, letting those men reach the cores would make the disaster worse. I looked at the girl, at the village, at the blue dragon dying in the ditch and the red dragon burning without flame. In 2026, I knew what to do with a collapsed roof. I knew oxygen bottles, hose pressure, triage tags, and how much time a person had in black smoke. Here, I knew nothing except that predators had arrived before the dust settled. The azure dragon whispered, "Touch, or the defiler takes rain and wind." The crimson dragon growled, "Touch, or he takes fire and blood." I told the girl, "Get him downhill. Keep people away from the bodies." She did not know my words, but she understood the shove of my hand in the direction of my eyes. She got under her grandfather's arm. I ran between the dead gods and put my left hand on blue scales, my right hand on red. The valley vanished. Cold entered behind my left lung. Heat entered behind my right. They did not flow through skin and muscle like medicine. They drove under my ribs as if two fists made of weather had punched through my chest and decided to stay. I fell to my knees in a place without ground. The azure dragon rose above me as a tower of stormlight, wounded but proud. The crimson dragon coiled opposite, furnace bright, its throat torn open and still smiling. Between them hung two broken cores, one blue, one red. Each was cracked through the center. Each wanted the other gone. "Mortal vessel," Azure said. "You are unsuitable." Crimson snorted sparks. He ran toward death while wiser men ran away. "I have worn worse." "Nobody is wearing me," I said. They both looked down. That was when the words appeared in my sight. Twin Dragon System awakened. Host, Shinkai. Origin, displaced. Level, 0. Body, 7. Speed, 6. Spirit, 3. Perception, 5. Will, 8. I stared at the numbers because numbers were easier than the fact that two dead dragons were arguing over my lungs. Rules unfolded in hard, bright lines. Defeat corrupted enemies to gain dragon essence. Meaningful participation is required. Slaughter of helpless beings grants nothing. Dragon essence may raise levels, unlock techniques, restore cores, or fuel regeneration. Azure techniques govern movement, wind, perception, and healing. Crimson techniques govern strength, fire, intimidation, and regeneration. Dragon eyes reveal visible essence, injuries, and elemental affinity. Dragon eyes cannot read thoughts, reveal hidden enemies, predict the future, or pierce concealed power without contest. Then came the part that tried to sound like a blessing and failed. Twin core immortality established. Immortality prevents aging and can repair severe wounds while at least one core remains intact and supplied with essence. Immortality does not prevent death. Lethal counters, destruction of both cores, decapitation before regeneration begins, soul attack severing host will from cores, essence starvation followed by mortal trauma, weapons forged from opposing dragon power, seals that pin one core while forcing possession through the other. Non-lethal disabling counters remain effective: poison, drowning, smoke, crushing, restraint, exhaustion, disease, blood loss before repair, formations, terrain, surprise, and numbers. I almost laughed. It came out as a cough. Immortal, except for a list long enough to fill a training manual. The system did not promise genius. It did not hand me maps, languages, chemistry, or a book titled How to Build the 21st Century with Mud and Panic. I knew how to force doors, move smoke, stop bleeding, keep a crowd from trampling itself, and throw a man who overcommit his weight. That was useful. It was not civilization in my pocket. Another line appeared as if the cores had heard the thought. Modern memory does not convert into mastered craft. Practical knowledge requires tools, materials, local skill, and verification. At least one rule is honest, I said. Crimson's tail lashed through the void. Knowledge is a dull blade. Dull blades still cut rope. Azure's silver eye narrowed. A vessel who admits ignorance may survive longer than one who pretends. That sounded almost like approval. It was not. Final warning, favoring either dragon path beyond balance threshold permits spirit suppression. Severe imbalance permits temporary possession. The azure dragon lowered its wounded head. I will preserve you if you obey. Detachment is survival. The crimson dragon's eye burned like a forged ore. I will make you feared if you stop flinching. Fear is survival. I spent 8 years running into buildings other people ran out of, I said. Fear is information. It is not a boss. Crimson's grin widened. The system gave one more pulse. Current essence, 0. Available techniques require essence. So I have rules: no fuel, 2 hostile landlords in my chest, and armed men outside. Azure said, your summary is crude. It is accurate. The valley snapped back around me. I was kneeling between the dragon corpses. Blue blood steamed on my left hand. Red heat crawled over my right glove and did not burn through. My ribs felt too small for what sat behind them. The northern soldiers had reached the first houses. The fast shapes were worse up close. They had once been men. I knew that before I knew anything else. Their shoulders were human under the gray fur. Their hands still had thumbs. But their backs bent too far, their jaws pushed forward, and black vapor leaked from iron collars around their necks. Wolfmen. Corrupted. Enslaved. One slammed through a gate where the old man and the girl had dragged themselves. A child screamed inside. Dragon eyes opened before I asked. Corrupted wolf thrall. Level 1. Essence 12. Injuries: left knee strain, cracked lower fong. Affinity: weak fire contamination. Control source: iron collar feeding corruption into spine. Pain stabbed behind my eyes, sharp and immediate. Useful. Not omniscient. The words told me what I could see if I knew how to look. They did not stop the creature from lunging at the child. My axe was still clipped to my belt. It was a firefighter's axe, not a war axe, pick head, flat pole, red paint chipped from the handle. I had used it on doors, drywall, roof vents, and once the trunk of a crushed sedan. It was not made for monsters. That did not matter. Tools do the job in front of them. I crossed the yard in 3 long steps and hit the wolfman behind the ear with the flat pole. It staggered. Did not fall. The girl dragged the child back as claws tore through the place where the child's face had been. I slipped left, the way my old Sanda coach had drilled into me until I hated him for it, and chopped my shin into the creature's damaged knee. The leg buckled. I caught its collar with the axe hook, pulled hard, and drove its head into a stone trough. The collar rang. Black vapor spat into my face. It tasted like copper and rotten smoke. The crimson dragon surged. Kill it. Collar, I said through my teeth. The creature twisted, half-human eyes rolling in the fur. I planted one boot on its shoulder and levered the axe under the iron band. The metal bit into the handle. My shoulder screamed. The collar snapped. The wolfman convulsed. Fur retreated in patches. The jaw shortened with a wet crack that made my stomach turn. A man collapsed in the mud, naked to the waist, sobbing. Meaningful defeat confirmed. Dragon essence gained, 10. Not 12. The system had shown what he carried, not what I received. Loss in the transfer. Cost in the breaking. Another rule. 2 more wolf thralls came over the fence. The girl put herself between them and her grandfather with a reed knife smaller than my hand. Move. I shouted. She did not. So I moved around her. The first wolf thrall leapt from the fence line. The second stayed low and circled toward the old man. Pack behavior. Human enough to use angles, corrupted enough to ignore pain. I had 10 essence, no unlocked technique, and a bleeding cut across my forearm I did not remember getting. Azure offered a line of blue text. Mending breath, 5 essence per stabilization pulse, or 15 for full treatment. First successful use permanently learns the technique. Costs heat. Slow under combat stress. It stabilizes, it does not regenerate destroyed tissue. Crimson answered in red. Ember fist, 5 essence. 1 heat pulse through limb or held weapon. Burns weak bindings and flesh. Repeated use damages host tissue. Furnace muscle, 15 essence. Temporary strength surge. Risk of tearing unprepared muscle. 5 I can afford, I muttered. Crimson purred. Finally. I did not spend it yet. The low wolf came for the old man. I kicked a broken bucket into its path. It hopped it easily, which told me enough. I stepped in as it landed, jammed the axe handle across its throat, and used its own forward motion to turn it over my hip. My throw was ugly. Mud stole my pivot. The creature still hit the ground. The leaping one landed on my back. Claws tore through turnout fabric and into my shoulder. I went down on one knee. Hot pain flashed white. Its jaws snapped near my ear. Give me the body, Crimson said. I will show you speed. Azure cut in, refuse. Its hunger is immediate. Both of you shut up. I slammed backward into the fence post. Once. Twice. On the third hit, the wolf's grip loosened. The girl darted in and slashed the strap holding the collar's rear hinge. Not enough to break it. Enough to make the iron shift. Again. I barked. She understood tone if not words. She slashed again and lost the tip of her knife. I spent 5 essence on Ember Fist. Heat wrapped my right hand, not a fireball, not a movie punch, just a tight brutal pulse like grabbing a live stove through a glove. I drove my fist against the damaged collar hinge. The iron flashed red. The hinge split. The wolfman fell off me and hit the mud as a shuddering human. Dragon essence gained, 8. Current essence, 13. The low one was already up. The old man had a shoulder pull across its jaws and was losing the contest inch by inch. I needed 15 for healing. I had 13. My shoulder was wet and weakening. The sensible choice was to retreat and find a door. The village did not have that kind of time. More screams rose from the western lane. Soldiers were setting houses on fire. Not uncontrolled flame. They used little clay jars that burst into sticky red sparks along roof thatch. They were not trying to burn the whole village at once. They were driving people out into the open where archers could sort them. My firefighter brain sorted the scene without asking permission. Wind from north. Fire on west roofs. Grain store east of the well. Irrigation ditch broken near Dragon Body. People clustering in the main lane, which meant trampling risk. Enemy entering from ridge and western lane. Water source still usable if we cleared the well. I said to the girl, pointing at the well, then the roof, then miming throwing water. She stared for half a second, then shouted in her own language. Her voice cut through panic like a thrown stone. 3 villagers broke from hiding. One had a cleaver. One had a rake. One limped with a basket of wet clothes. Good. She had authority, or at least volume. I hooked the low wolf's collar from behind while it fought the old man. It twisted. I gave ground instead of resisting, pulled it past me, and rammed its head into the well stones. The collar cracked but held. The wolf recovered faster than I did. Its claws opened my thigh. Body 7 did not mean pain bounced off. It meant I stayed upright when a normal man might have dropped. There is a difference, and the difference hurts. The crimson dragon laughed. Spend. 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 I had 13 essence. One more freed thrall would get me healing. One mistake would get my throat opened. The girl solved it. She threw the broken reed knife at the wolf's face. It flinched. The old man jammed the shoulder pole through the collar gap and twisted with both hands. I brought the axe down on the hinge. Iron snapped. The third thrall collapsed. Dragon essence gained, 9. Current essence, 22. Level progress advanced. No time to read the rest. My shoulder was losing strength. I spent 15 on a full mending breath treatment. The first successful use fixed the technique permanently in the Azure core. Cold ran from the Azure core into my wound. It was not gentle. It felt like icy fingers pulling torn meat together one thread at a time. Bleeding slowed. Muscle tightened enough to move. Frost crept along my collarbone and under my jaw. Current essence, 7. Azure said, better. Pain clouds judgment. Crimson snarled, mercy wastes fuel. People are not fuel. The words came out loud enough that the girl glanced at me. Maybe that was the first sentence she understood. 6 more wolf thralls entered the main lane. Behind them came soldiers with short bows. The villagers began to scatter. I pointed to the slope, the grain cart, and the narrow bend by the well. I did not know their words, so I used the language every emergency scene understands: hands, eyes, urgency, and a voice that does not ask permission. The girl picked it up. She shouted names. A woman with a cleaver cut loose the cart's wheel chock. 2 boys shoved from behind. The old grain cart lurched down the lane toward the well. The wolf thralls reacted like predators. 2 jumped aside. 1 tried to vault it and took the cart edge in the ribs. The 4th bounded straight for me. I met it with the axe handle across its throat, stepped deep, and threw it into the cart's path. The wheel climbed its chest and pinned it long enough for the cleaver woman to hack at the collar strap. An arrow struck my turnout coat and stuck in the thick fabric over my ribs. That was when I remembered I was not fighting monsters alone. Men were shooting at us. The next arrow came lower. I twisted. It cut across my hip instead of burying in my gut. A 3rd arrow struck the well bucket and sent splinters into the old man's cheek. The archers stood at the western mouth of the lane behind 2 shieldmen, calm as butchers. Dragon eyes. Core hunter soldier. Level 2. Essence, 4, injuries, none. Affinity, none. Core hunter archer. Level 2. Essence, 5, right shoulder tight. Core hunter shieldman. Level 3. Essence, 6, armor, lamellar, weak under left arm. The information came with a spike of pain behind both eyes. Blood warmed my upper lip. I shut the sight off. This was the trap with magic information. Knowing did not move my feet. It did not make arrows slow. It did not give me a shield. Roof, the girl shouted, then pointed up. I did not understand the word. I understood the direction. A roof beam had cracked loose from the burned house on the left. Wet clothes thrown over the thatch had slowed the fire but not stopped it. Smoke rolled low under the eaves. The beam sagged over the lane between us and the archers. I grabbed the old man's shoulder pole and shoved it up under the beam. In a warehouse fire, you do not trust a compromised roof. In a fight, you can sometimes invite it to fail where you want. Pull back, I said. The girl shoved villagers away from the lane. I drove the pole upward and sideways. My healed shoulder protested. The beam shifted. Sparks fell into my hair. The archers drew again. I kicked the pole. The roof edge came down in a crash of tile, smoke, and burning reeds. It did not crush the soldiers. It blocked their line of sight and filled the lane with enough smoke to make them cough. I had been hoping for that. Smoke is a weapon if you respect it. It is death if you do not. Wet cloth! I shouted, then mimed over my mouth. The girl understood at once. She ripped a sleeve from a fallen robe, soaked it in the well splash, and tied it over her nose. Others copied her. The cloth could cool the face and catch some ash for a short escape. It would not make poison smoke safe. Good. Smart people survive if someone gives them a pattern fast enough. The wolf thrall pinned under the cart snapped its jaws at the cleaver woman. She kept hacking. A boy no older than 12 held the wheel down with his whole body. The collar broke. The thrall shrank, human again, and the boy fell on top of him crying. Dragon essence gained, 7. Current essence, 14. Not enough for healing. Enough for one amber fist and a mistake. The soldiers pushed through the smoke. Their shieldman came first, low and disciplined. His short spear thrust toward my stomach. I knocked it aside with the axe haft and stepped in, but he knew his range. He retreated half a step and let the archer behind him shoot past his shoulder. The arrow hit my left forearm. I had been cut and burned before. An arrow is different. It turns the limb into a nailed board. My hand opened by reflex. The axe nearly fell. Crimson roared, "Let me break him." Azure said, "Withdraw. Preserve the vessel." Behind me, the old man had 2 wounded villagers under the well awning. The girl was dragging a child out of smoke. There was nowhere useful to withdraw. I shifted the axe to my right hand. My left arm burned. The shield man advanced. Then a stone cracked against his helmet from above. Lin Mei stood on a low roof with a sling in her hand. I did not know her name yet, but I knew competence when I saw it. She had climbed the back wall, found a pouch of river stones, and changed the geometry of the fight. The shield man looked up. I kicked his front knee sideways. The roof under her was smoking. She knew it. I saw her test each tile before shifting her weight, using the balls of her feet, never standing where the rafters had burned through. She was not playing hero. She was doing the same ugly math I was. If she stayed low, the shieldman killed me. If she climbed, the smoke might take her. If she moved fast, she could make one chance for all of us. The second archer adjusted toward her. "Down!" I shouted. She dropped flat before the word could mean anything. The arrow passed through the space above her braid. A boy below the eaves reached up with a wet quilt and slapped it over the smoking tiles near her knees. Lin Mei did not thank him. She shoved another stone into the sling and kept working. Armor does not protect a joint from bad angles. He dropped. I hooked the top of his shield with the axe pick and yanked it down. The cleaver woman drove her blade under his arm. Not clean. Not pretty. Enough. I did not get essence from him. He was hostile, but not corrupted. The system did not pay for every body on the ground. That rule mattered. It kept the numbers from turning murder into arithmetic. The archer behind him hesitated. Lin Mei's second stone hit his bow hand. I closed the distance and slammed the axe pole into his temple. He fell breathing. 2 more soldiers dragged the fallen men back through smoke. They were scared now. Scared men are dangerous because they either run or overcommit. Their captain made the choice for them. "Forward," he shouted from beyond the smoke. The voice carried command. The soldiers stiffened. The remaining wolf thralls howled as black threads brightened around their collars. Dragon eyes flickered on without permission. Captain Luo. Level, 5. Essence, 87. Injuries, old fracture, right wrist, scar tissue left ribs. Weapon, Dragon-Sinew hook spear. Affinity, crimson resistance high. Threat, collar command link. The captain stepped into view. He was broad, armored better than the others, and carried a hook spear with dark red cords braided along the shaft. Those cords pulsed in time with the collars. He looked at me, then at the empty dragon corpses beyond the village, and his expression changed from annoyance to hunger. The Kors chose a mud stranger, he said. I should not have understood him. The words entered my head a beat after his mouth moved, translated by the Kors or the system or some other problem I did not have time to examine. He smiled. Cut him open carefully. The wolf thralls came before the soldiers. Captain Luo did not waste trained men while corrupted bodies could spend themselves first. Black threads tugged from his spear into 5 collars. The thralls' eyes went red-gray. Any human fear left in them sank below the command. I had 14 essence, 1 working arm, 1 bad shoulder, a cut thigh, and a village full of people watching to see whether the stranger with dragon light under his skin had a plan. I had part of one. Water, I told Lin Mei, pointing to the ditch, then to the lane. Mud. She frowned for half a breath, then shouted. Villagers broke the little earth banks around the smashed irrigation channel. Water spilled through the lane, turning ash and dust into slick mud. The first thrall hit the wet patch too fast. Its claws skidded. I stepped aside and brought the axe down on its collar. The blow rang but did not break. My left arm would not grip well enough for leverage. The second thrall came at my blind side. Lin Mei's sling stone took it in the eye. It stumbled. The old man, limping badly, rammed a shoulder pole between its feet. It fell hard enough to crack its jaw on the stones. Villagers swarmed the fallen one with ropes. Good. Frightened people with tools had become a force. The third thrall jumped over the mud entirely and hit me in the chest. We went down. My back slammed into a broken door. Its collar pressed against my chin. Its claws dug into my coat. I could smell old blood and wet fur. My right hand was trapped under its ribs with the axe handle between us. Crimson whispered, 5 essence. Burn through its throat. Azure whispered, 15 essence would heal the arm. You lack 15. Collar, I said. The wolf snapped. Teeth cut my cheek. I spent 5 essence on Ember Fist and drove the heat not into flesh, but into the collar plate under its jaw. The iron flashed. I turned my wrist and forced the axe pick into the softened metal. The collar split. The man who had been inside the wolf collapsed on top of me, shaking. Dragon essence gained, 9. Current essence, 18. Level threshold reached. Integrate now? There are bad times to read instructions. There are worse times to ignore them. Now, I said. Level gained. Chen Kai, level 1. Body increased to 8. Choose 1 bonus increase, speed or perception. Choose within 10 breaths. Speed meant not getting skewered by Luo's spear. Perception meant understanding the spear, the collars, the enemy formation, and maybe the next trap before it closed. My legs were tired. My instincts wanted speed. My firefighter brain chose information. Perception. Perception increased to 6. The world sharpened. Not slowed. Sharpened. Water threads crawled through mud. The archer behind Luo kept weight off his right foot. 1 wolf thrall had a collar hinge half rusted through. Luo's spear point dipped before he thrust because his old wrist fracture did not like the hook's weight. The black command threads did not come from his hand. They came from a red bead tied below the spearhead. That was useful. It also hurt like a nail behind the eyes. Available technique, wind step, 20 essence. Current essence, 18. Too short. Crimson offered another line without system formatting. Let me move the body. No cost. Free power is never free. I knew that from burning buildings and overtime politics. If someone says the cost is nothing, they are either lying or counting on you not reading the bill. No. The Crimson Dragon pushed anyway. My right hand tightened around the axe. Heat crawled up my forearm. For one breath, I wanted Luo to come closer so I could hear his bones crack. Not wanted in the ordinary angry way. Wanted like hunger. Lin Mei shouted from the roof. I did not understand the word, but I heard warning in it. That human sound gave me the half second I needed to unclench my hand. Balance warning, crimson influence rising. I noticed. The last 2 thralls rushed together. I did not have wind step. I had mud, a sharper eye, and people who had learned fast. I feinted toward the rusted collar. Luo's spear twitched to protect it. That told me he cared which thrall fell. The other had the stronger command link. Left! I shouted, pointing at the rusted hinge. Lin Mei hit it with a stone. The cleaver woman followed with a chop. I used my stronger right shoulder to slam the thrall sideways into the well stones. The hinge broke. Dragon essence gained, 8. Current essence, 26. Wind step became affordable. But the last thrall had the old man. Its claws wrapped around his throat. Luo smiled behind it. If I moved wrong, the old man died before any technique mattered. Azure said, wind step. Angle behind. Clean. Crimson said, Ember Fist. Burn through both. Both were too sure. I looked at Lin Mei. She had gone still on the roof. Her sling hung loose. Her grandfather's face was turning purple. I pointed 2 fingers at my own eyes, then at the collar bead on Luo's spear. I pointed at her sling. She understood. The stone flew. Luo lifted the spear to bat it aside. That pulled the command thread tight. The thrall jerked half an inch backward, not by choice. I spent 20 essence on wind step. Cold wind struck the soles of my feet. My body went light for 1 step, only 1. I did not fly. I did not blur. I crossed an angle I should not have crossed and landed beside the thrall's shoulder. The technique ended at once, leaving my calves hollow. I hooked the collar, planted my foot on the well, and pulled until the iron opened. The old man fell breathing. Dragon essence gained, 10. Current essence, 16. Every wolf thrall in the lane was down, human again, or close enough to weep. The village had survived the first wave. Captain Luo looked at his broken command links and stopped smiling. When the last collar broke, the village changed. Not safe. Not calm. Changed. A minute earlier, Willowbank had been a target, roofs burning, villagers running, soldiers choosing victims. Now the villagers had seen monsters fall and men come back out of the fur. They had seen Lin Mei's sling turn a captain's plan. They had seen their own hands matter. That does something to fear. Fear remained. It always does. But it stopped flowing one way. The soldiers felt it too. The 2 archers shifted back. One looked toward the ridge. Captain Luo struck him across the face with the butt of his spear hard enough to drop him. The first man to run feeds the next collar, Luo said. The translation arrived cold in my head. I looked at the freed thralls. Some were conscious. Some were not. All were wounded. If Luo had spare collars, he could start again. If he reached the dragon corpses, he might find whatever residue the cores had left. If he took me, he could cut the answer out of my ribs. Immediate fire mostly under control. Western roofs smoking but not spreading. Grain store wet and safe for now. Civilians clustered near the well, too close to the fight. Enemy captain in lane. Enemy soldiers uncertain. My resources, 16 essence, level 1, body 8, speed 6, spirit 3, perception 6, will 8. Techniques, mending breath, ember fist, wind step. Costs high. Body tired. Eyes painful. Left arm weak. That was my scene size up. Luo advanced. He was not huge in the impossible sense. He was just big enough, armored enough, trained enough, and fresh enough to make every step expensive. His hook spear gave him reach. The blade had an inward crescent on one side and a straight point on the other. Red cords along the shaft flexed like tendons. Dragon-Sinew hook spear. Opposing dragon weapon. Crimson resistance high. One of the lethal counters. Not a full executioner by itself, but a tool made for people like me. The warning from the system returned in plain language: weapons forged from opposing dragon power could kill what ordinary steel might only wound. Luo saw recognition on my face. You can read it, he said. Good. I want you afraid. I am, I said. That confused him. Fear is information. My fear said the spear was not a prop. My fear said do not grab the blade, do not trust regeneration, do not let him pin me, do not let him touch the cores. Useful fear. Fireground fear. Luo did not attack immediately. He tapped the spear but once against the stones. His shieldmen split. One moved toward the well awning, where our wounded lay. The other angled for the burned house, where Lin Mei's roof path ended. The archers spread until I could not watch both without turning my head. He was checking whether I would chase the first threat he showed me. I had taught new firefighters not to let the loudest victim erase the whole scene. Luo was using the same weakness on purpose. Give the rescuer 3 emergencies, then strike while he chose which failure he could live with. Well! I shouted, chopping one hand downward. Eldershin answered before Lin Mei translated. He kicked a coil of carrying rope toward the cleaver woman. She and two farmers hauled it waist-high across the lane, then braced it around the well posts. Not enough to stop armored soldiers. Enough to spoil a rush and make them look at their feet. Lin Mei slapped two roof tiles together. The boy with the sling stones ducked behind a chimney. When the left archer drew toward the awning, the boy stood and threw, not at the man, but at the bow. The stone struck the lower limb. The shot went into the mud. Luo twisted his spear. The red cord snapped taut. A freed man under the well awning arched in the mud as a broken collar wound along his spine flashed black. No collar remained on him, but residue did. Control source, command scarring. Temporary reactivation possible through Dragon-Sinew hook spear. The system's warning arrived with a stab behind my eyes. Luo could still hurt the people we had freed. Breaking iron was not the same as removing what the iron had done. You thought opening the cages made them yours? Luo asked. A hook leaves a hole even after you pull it out. The man in the mud clawed at his own throat. His jaw pushed forward, then stopped. He was fighting it. I stepped between Luo and him. Azure said, the damaged subject is a tactical liability. Crimson said, break the hand holding the leash. One answer discarded a man. The other wanted my anger. I chose the useful middle. Lin Mei. Bead. I pointed to the red bead under Luo's spearhead. She saw it. Her sling rose. Luo shifted the hook to guard the bead, exactly as I needed. His soldiers lost the pulse driving them forward. Eldershin cut the carrying rope loose from the well post, and the villagers pulled their wounded behind the stone trough. Lin Mei did not waste her shot. She held the sling drawn, forcing Luo to keep the spearhead angled away from me. For 3 breaths, a 17-year-old with a riverstone occupied the weapon of a level 5 captain. Then Luo smiled and flicked the spear so fast the red cords blurred. Lin Mei released. His hook split the stone in the air. The fragments cut his cheek. His smile vanished. Luo thrust. The spear point dipped a fraction because of his wrist. Perception caught it. My body barely kept up. I twisted aside and slapped the shaft with the axe handle. The hook caught the axe head and ripped it out of my grip. So much for that plan. The return stroke opened my side. Pain flashed from hip to rib. Hot blood ran under the coat. The wound did not close. I had essence, but regeneration was not automatic for every cut. Mending breath could slow bleeding. Using it while he had reach would get me skewered. I backed into the narrowest part of the lane. Luo followed without hurry. His soldiers formed behind him, shields up, but they did not crowd him. Disciplined. He had done this before. Lin Mei moved along the roofline, sling ready. Luo did not look up, but his spear flicked. A red thread snapped from the bead and cracked a roof tile 2 inches from her hand. She jerked back. Roof rat, Luo said. After him, I collar the girl first. Crimson surged so hard my right eye blurred red. Kill him. For once, the advice was emotionally satisfying. Azure cut through the heat. He provokes imbalance. I breathed once. Smoke, blood, wet mud. The old training returned, chin down, shoulders loose, see the hips. My axe lay behind Luo's left heel. My rescue rope, melted at one end but still usable, hung from Lin Mei's belt. The roof beam above the lane was cracked. The mud under Luo's rear foot was slicker than the stones under his front. I needed him to commit. You came for dragon cores, I said. You got beaten by farmers. His face hardened. Good. Stupid thing to say if it failed. Useful if it worked. He lunged. I spent no essence. I dropped low and let the spear pass over my shoulder. The hook sliced through the back of my coat and caught fabric. I drove a front kick into his knee. Armor took most of it. His stance shifted half an inch. Half an inch was something. He yanked the spear back, dragging me with the hooked cloth. I went with it instead of fighting, crashed into his chest, and tried to clinch. It was like clinching a gate. He head-butted me. Stars burst across my vision. His gauntlet slammed into my ribs. I felt something crack. He shoved me off, reversed the spear, and drove the point through my thigh into the mud. The world narrowed to a bright line of pain. Pinned. One of the disabling counters. Not lethal yet. A setup. He knew enough not to assume immortality meant invulnerability. He knew restraint created the moment where a stronger weapon could finish the job. The soldiers behind him started to move around the lane edges. Perception caught the pattern through tears, not charging, measuring. One man watched my hands. One watched Lin Mei. One watched the freed thralls to see if they would rise again. Luo had trained them to support a duel without spoiling his reach. That was worse than a mob. A mob leaves gaps because every man wants to be first. These men were willing to be second, third, and fourth if it meant I had nowhere clean to fall. I tried to drag my leg sideways. The spear point had gone between muscle and bone, then into earth. The pain was sharp, but the problem was leverage. If I pulled straight up, the hook below the blade tore more flesh. If I stayed still, Luo could twist. If I grabbed the blade, the Dragon-Sinew edge might open the core path in my chest before I understood what that meant. Immortality had become a geometry problem. Luo leaned on the shaft. Regenerate that. The spear point pulsed. Crimson essence inside my right core recoiled from the Dragon-Sinew metal. My body wanted to heal. The wound refused to answer. Luo smiled. There you are. Pinned by a spear, you discover how small the world can get. There was Luo's face above me. There was the shaft through my thigh. There was my own breath coming too fast. There was the red bead below the spearhead, still carrying broken strands of command. There were villagers 10 steps away who wanted to help and would die if they rushed wrong. Azure whispered, detach. Pain is noise. Crimson whispered, give me the body. I will tear the leg free. Both temptations had the same shape, stop being Chenkai for a moment. Let something older and colder or hotter handle it. I had seen firefighters make bad calls when panic stole them. I had seen strong men freeze in smoke because the brain decided pain was the whole universe. The answer was not to become fearless. The answer was a task. Task 1, keep Luo from twisting the spear. I gripped the shaft with both hands. My left arm screamed. Blood slicked my fingers. Task 2, find his weak point. Dragon eyes flickered. I forced them narrow, not over the whole scene, just Luo's hands. Old fracture, right wrist. Stress rising. Grip compromised under lateral pull. Needle pain drove into my eyes. I shut the sight down before it blinded me. Task 3, create lateral pull. My rope was gone. Lin Mei had it. I looked at her on the roof. She was pale with smoke under her eyes. She held the sling in one hand and my melted rescue rope in the other, probably taken from where I had dropped it near the well. Smart. Always grab useful tools. I could not explain the plan in a shared language. I could only show her the problem. I locked both hands around Luo's spear shaft and jerked my eyes toward his wrist. Luo noticed the glance and laughed. You think a child will save you? Lin Mei moved. She did not throw the rope like a city firefighter with a trained toss. She looped it around a roof peg, dropped from the eaves, and swung low enough for the melted end to whip around Luo's right wrist. Then she hit the ground badly, rolled through mud, and pulled with both hands. She was half his size. She pulled anyway. The rope tightened across the old fracture. Luo snarled. His grip loosened for the first time. I spent 5 essence on Ember Fist, not to attack him, but to heat the spear shaft where it entered the mud. Steam burst around the point. The ground softened. I tore my thigh upward. The spear came free with a sound I will not forget. Current essence, 11. I nearly blacked out. Mending breath would cost 15. I did not have it. Immortality with no fuel is just a promise written on empty paper. Luo tried to wrench his wrist free. Lin Mei slid through mud but held the rope. The old man hooked his shoulder pole over the rope and added his weight. The cleaver woman grabbed the old man's belt. A boy grabbed hers. The whole village became one bad pulley. I drove my shoulder into Luo's chest. He struck me across the jaw with his left fist. My teeth clicked. I tasted blood. I stayed in. Sanda clinch. Head under chin. Hips close. Do not wrestle the armor, attack the joint. I trapped his right wrist with both hands, turned the way I had turned training partners 1,000 times, and stepped across his line. The rope held the far end. My body dropped. His wrist broke. The sound cut through the lane. Luo screamed. The spear fell. Crimson howled approval. Yes. The heat in my right core surged toward his throat. For 1 second I saw the simple version, pick up the spear, drive it through him, end the threat forever. The villagers would understand. He had earned death by every law I knew and several I had just met. But the red bead under the spearhead still glowed. His soldiers still watched him. The freed thralls still needed answers. Dead men do not release orders if their last command is locked in a weapon. I kicked the spear away instead of taking it. Luo drew a knife with his left hand. Lin Mei saw it and shouted. I caught his elbow with my bad arm, took his back, and wrapped the rescue rope across his throat and knife wrist. Not a clean choke. A firefighter's ugly restraint, rope, leverage, and panic strength. Release the collars, I said. He spat blood. They are already ruined. I tightened the rope. All of them. He froze. That told me there were more. Behind the soldiers, at the edge of the village, 3 pack cages rocked under gray cloth. I had thought they carried supplies. Perception now caught the black vapor leaking through the slats. More thralls. Reserves. The village survival fight was not over. We had won the lane and missed the second blade. Luo laughed even as the rope cut his breath. Open those cages and your precious peasants die tired. Azure said, kill him. Remove command. Crimson said, kill him slowly. For once they agreed, which made me distrust the advice more. I looked at Lin Mei. She had followed my gaze to the cages. Her face changed. Not fear this time. Calculation. She shouted to the rooftops. Villagers with wet cloth masks began moving toward the side alleys, not the cages. Sling stones appeared in hands. Farm hooks lifted. Someone dragged a fishing net from a wall. They moved before I could order them, each carrying a part of the plan. I just had to keep Luo breathing long enough to ruin his. The gray cloth came off the first cage. What crawled out was not a wolf thrall. It had a man's arms and a boar's shoulders, skin plated with dark bristles, lower jaw split by tusks. Its collar was thicker, double-hinged, and bolted into the spine with black pins. The second cage held 2 smaller things with crane-like legs and human faces stretched into sharp beaks. The third cage rocked as something inside slammed against the bars again and again, slow and heavy. Dragon eyes pulsed before I could stop them. Corrupted boar brute. Level 3. Essence 28. Weakness, left eye blinded, collar rear pin exposed during charge. Corrupted reedstock harriers. Level 2. Essence 16 each. Weakness, hollow leg bones, throat collars thin but fast. Pain lanced through my skull. Blood ran from my nose onto Luo's armor. The system had shown me 3 enemy types in one blink. It had not shown me how to fight them while bleeding from the thigh with 11 essence and a captain under my arm. Luo sucked air through the rope. Now choose, vessel. Me or them. I chose neither. Lin Mei. I shouted, because by then I had heard villagers call her name. She looked at me. I pointed to the boar's left eye, then made a circle behind my neck. I pointed to the harrier's legs and chopped downward with my hand. She repeated the gestures faster and cleaner to the villagers. The boar brute charged. Not at me. At the clustered wounded by the well. I shoved Luo into the old man and lunged for the Dragon-Sinew spear on the ground. The moment my hand touched it, both cores recoiled. It felt like grabbing ice wrapped in hornets. Opposing dragon weapon. Lethal counter material. My palm blistered. I used it anyway. Not as a spear. As a lever. I jammed the shaft through the spokes of the abandoned grain cart and kicked the cart into the boar's path. The brute hit it with enough force to shatter one wheel, but the shaft tangled under its chest and turned the charge 6 inches. 6 inches saved the wounded. It crashed into the well awning instead. The roof collapsed over its head. Lin Mei's sling stone struck its blind side. A second stone from a rooftop hit the exposed rear pin. The boar tore free, roaring. The reed harriers came through the smoke like knives on stilts. One vaulted over a roofline and landed behind the cleaver woman. She did not see it. A boy did. He threw a basket at its legs. The harrier hopped clear, and I spent 20 essence on wind step without having 20. The system rejected me. Insufficient essence. Of course it did. Panic is bad accounting. I ran instead. Speed 6 was not magic. Body 8 was not flight. My wounded thigh nearly folded. I threw myself between the harrier and the woman and took a beak slash across my ribs. The creature's throat collar flashed near my face. Current essence, 11. Ember fist cost 5. If I used it wrong, I would have 6 left and a burned hand. If I did nothing, the harrier would open someone. I used Ember fist through the axe head I had recovered with my boot. Heat ran down the metal. I swung not at the harrier's head but at its knee joint. Hollow bone cracked. It dropped. The cleaver woman brought both hands down on the thin collar. Dragon essence gained, 12. Current essence, 18. The second harrier screamed and darted toward Lin Mei. She did not run backward. She ran sideways across the roof, drawing it away from the wounded. Smart again. Too smart by half, because the roof tiles under her left foot broke. She fell through the burned edge. The Harrier jumped after her. I spent 15 essence on mending breath as I ran. Not for a wound. For the thigh enough to move. Cold clamped down around the spear hole. The bleeding slowed. My leg went numb from hip to knee. Current essence, 3. No ember fist. No wind step. No trick left but body and timing. Lin Mei hit the floor inside the half-burned house and rolled under a fallen table. The Harrier landed above her. Its beak stabbed down. She shoved the table up with both feet. The beak punched through wood and stuck. I came through the doorway shoulder first, grabbed its leg, and drove it against the doorframe until the hollow bone snapped. Lin Mei crawled out, snatched a fallen roof hook, and tore the thin collar sideways. Dragon essence gained, 13. Current essence, 16. Outside, the boar brute had freed itself. It had 3 sling cuts near the blind eye, a cracked rear pin, and enough rage to flatten a wall. Luo was on his knees beside the old man, one wrist broken, one knife hand tied, still laughing. "You cannot save all doors," he wheezed. The third cage broke. Something huge stepped out wearing a collar made from 2 iron hoops and a strip of red scale. It had no animal shape. It was a man swollen by corruption until his skin split around plates of black horn. His eyes were human and awake. That was the worst part. Dragon eyes gave one line before pain forced them shut. Corrupted ox bearer. Level 4. Essence, 41. Begging internally. Collar fused to spine. The ox bearer picked up a burning roof beam and walked toward the grain store. Defeating Luo was not enough anymore. It was keeping Willowbank alive. The ox bearer's first step cracked a paving stone. His second left black blood in the mud. He was fighting the collar. I could see it in the tiny delays between command and movement. The beam wanted to swing high, his hands dragged it lower. The collar forced his head toward the grain store, his eyes rolled toward the wounded instead, warning them without words. That made him more dangerous and more urgent. A mindless brute could be trapped. A man trapped inside a brute suffered every second we hesitated. If I killed him fast, the grain might be safe. If I tried to save him and failed, the village could burn. The system gave no moral discount for hard choices. Lin Mei saw the same thing without dragon eyes. She had no glowing text, but she saw the tears cutting pale lines through soot on the ox-bearer's face. She lowered her sling a fraction, then lifted it again toward the collar instead of the eye. Good. We were still choosing the harder target. The grain store stood on raised stones east of the well. Thick walls. Tiled roof. One door. If it burned, Willowbank might survive the day and start before the next planting. Firefighters learn early that saving a life sometimes means saving the thing that keeps life possible tomorrow. The ox-bearer carried the burning beam like a torch. The boar brute charged the villagers trying to form a bucket line. The remaining soldiers saw the plan and rallied. Of course they did. They did not need to win every fight. They only needed to burn the store, take me in the confusion, and leave the village broken behind them. For the first time since arriving, I understood the wider campaign in front of me. This was not a random raid. It was a method. Core hunters harvested dragon remains, used collars to make corrupted troops, burned food to silence witnesses, and left frightened villages too hungry to resist the next official tax cart. Luo was not the disease. He was a symptom with a spear. That promise landed in me with the weight of a roof beam. Willowbank first. Then the people behind Luo. Waterline. I shouted, and this time several villagers seemed to know what I meant because Lin Mei had already turned my gestures into their words. She stood in the burned house doorway with blood on her chin and pointed like a commander. Children carried small pots. Old women soaked blankets. 2 men cracked the irrigation bank wider. The old man, barely standing, ordered the wounded away from the lane and toward the stream. They were not waiting for me to save them. We had become a crew. The boar brute hit the first bucket team. I intercepted from the side, because straight on was suicide. I spent 5 essence on Ember Fist and struck the cracked rear pin at the base of its collar. The metal heated, but the pin held. The boar backhanded me into a fence. Current essence, 11. My ribs screamed. The fence broke. I landed in a pile of wet reeds and forced myself up. Crimson said, "Furnace muscle. Take the cost." It cost 15. I had 11. The system did not care about dramatic need. Azure said, "Wind step unavailable." Observe. Observe what? A giant boar man crushing people? Then perception found the answer. The brute's blind left side made it turn wide. Its charge could not stop once committed. The irrigation ditch beside the grain store had become a wet trench from the broken banks. Lin Mei. Left eye. She understood enough. Sling stones hit the brute's good side, forcing it to turn its blind side toward me. I waved both arms, made myself the insult. Come on. It came. I waited too long because fear said move and timing said not yet. The tusks filled my vision. I dropped and rolled toward its blind side. One tusk tore through my coat and opened my back. The brute thundered past and hit the trench edge. Mud collapsed under its front legs. It pitched forward. Villagers threw the fishing net over its head. The cleaver woman and 2 farmers hauled the net sideways. Lin Mei jumped down from the doorway, landed on its back, and drove the roof hook into the exposed rear pin. The brute bucked hard enough to throw her sideways. She hooked one arm through the net instead of letting herself fall under its hooves. The cleaver woman shifted her grip and took the strain. A farmer I had not noticed before, bald and bleeding from one ear, drove a pitchfork into the mud beside the net and used it as an anchor. The net fibers smoked where corruption touched them. Pull together. I shouted. They did not need my words. Eldershin counted in their language, 3 sharp beats. On the third, everyone pulled. The brute's head twisted. Lin Mei got both feet under her, set the roof hook again, and this time the exposed pin came out with a spray of black vapor. The pin tore loose. The boar brute screamed like a man waking underwater. I drove the axe into the collar hinge with everything left in my shoulders. Iron broke. Dragon essence gained, 24. Current essence, 35. Level progress advanced. Not enough for another level. Enough for choices. The ox bearer reached the grain store. Arrows flew from behind him. One struck a villager in the calf. Another bounced from the store wall. Luo's soldiers were using the ox bearer as moving cover. Dragon eyes showed the color fused to the spine. Breaking it might kill the man if done wrong. Leaving it would burn the village. Azure offered mending breath improvements for future healing. Crimson offered furnace muscle again, now affordable. Furnace muscle, 15 essence. Temporary body surge. Risk, muscle tears, crimson influence. I did not like it. I needed strength now, and I needed to remain myself after. Balance, I said. I spent 15 on furnace muscle and 5 on one stabilization pulse of mending breath at the same time, forcing heat and cold through the course together. Current essence, 15. Balance strain. Crimson roared pleasure. Azure hissed contempt. My body nearly split between them. Heat filled my legs. Cold wrapped my wounds. My muscles tightened like cables being winched too fast. I ran at the ox bearer. He swung the burning beam. I ducked under it and smelled my hair singe. I slammed into his waist. Without furnace muscle, I would have bounced off. With it, I moved him 1 step. 1 step was enough to turn the beam away from the grain store door. He looked down at me with human eyes. Help, he whispered in a voice like stones grinding. Trying. The soldiers behind him thrust spears around his body. One point punched into my shoulder. Another scraped my ribs. I held the ox bearer in place and shouted, blankets. Lin Mei and 3 villagers came in low with soaked blankets. Not at the beam. At the red scale strip on the collar. Steam exploded as wet cloth hit dragon heat. I planted both feet, grabbed the collar's front hoop, and pulled. Furnace muscle tore something in my back. Crimson laughed through my mouth. I tasted smoke and wanted to rip, burn, dominate. Lin Mei appeared in front of me. She put one hand on my wrist, right where red heat crawled under the skin. Shinkai, she said. My name, clear enough. It anchored me. I pulled the collar forward instead of crushing the man's throat. The rear fused pins tore out with blood and black vapor. The ox bearer collapsed. The burning beam fell into the mud, not the grain. Dragon essence gained, 33. Current essence, 48. The grain store still stood. The fires were losing. Captain Luo was not done. Luo had used the fight at the grain store the way any competent commander uses noise. While I followed the ox bearer, he got to his feet, cut half the rope from his throat with the edge of a fallen knife, and dragged his broken wrist against his chest. He could not use the hook spear properly with that hand. He did not need proper. He needed one clean opening. He ran for the dragon corpses. Not for me. Not for the grain. For the empty bodies at the edge of the village. Perception caught him too late. Luo! I shouted. He did not look back. The azure dragon's corpse lay across the broken irrigation ditch. The crimson dragon burned in the field beyond. Their cores were in me, but their bones, blood, sinew, and scale remained. If Dragon-Sinew weapons could counter immortality, then a corpse was an arsenal. If Luo harvested the corpses here, every village after Willowbank would face better weapons made from this day's failure. I ran. Furnace muscle was fading. The bill arrived in torn fibers along my back and thighs. Mending breath tried to hold me together and left frost in my lungs. I had 48 essence, but spending more while the cores fought inside me felt like pouring oil on both sides of a fire. Luo reached the azure dragon's neck and slammed his red bead against a broken scale. Black threads shot into the corpse. The dead dragon twitched. Azure screamed inside me, not in fear. In fury. Defiler. Crimson growled, he would leash corpses. Burn him. I agreed with the objection, not the method. Luo dragged a strip of shining blue sinew from the wound. It wrapped around the hook spear like a living cord. The weapon changed. Red cords and blue sinew twisted together, hating each other but bound by Luo's bead. Dragon eyes flashed against my will. Improvised opposing pair weapon. Threat, core puncture, regeneration disruption, possession destabilization. Luo turned. Blood ran from his mouth. His right wrist hung wrong. He held the spear in his left hand now, clumsy but still lethal. Alive was the order, he said. Open is close enough. Lin Mei and the villagers were too far behind. The field between Luo and me steamed with dragon blood. The mud glowed blue in patches and red in others. My boots smoked where I stepped wrong. He thrust. I read the dip from his damaged wrist and moved outside the point. Luo had expected that. The hook opened as it passed and caught the strap across my chest. He pulled me toward a red patch in the mud. Heat punched through both boots. The crimson dragon's blood recognized the core behind my right lung and climbed toward it in smoking threads. External essence contact. Assimilation available. Crimson favor increase, unknown. No price listed. That made the price obvious. Reject. The blood flared. Skin blistered above my ankles, but the threads fell away. Luo used the hesitation to sweep the spear shaft into my ribs. I blocked with my forearm and heard the old arrow wound tear open. The court mapped dragon blood before your ancestors learned to write their names, he said. You still stepped in mud. I kicked a sheet of blue water from the irrigation trench into his face. It was not a technique. Just dirty water carrying traces of azure blood. Luo jerked back as cold vapor wrapped the red cords on his spear. The cords tightened, resisting the blue. For one breath, the hook pulled in two directions. I grabbed the shaft below the sinew. Both cores convulsed. My hands locked. Azure wanted the blue strand ripped free and preserved. Crimson wanted the red cords burned away. Their argument ran down my arms and stopped my muscles as effectively as a nerve strike. Luo drove his knee into my wounded thigh. I fell. The spear point stopped against the turnout coat over my sternum. Not through it. Resting there, exactly between the cores. There are men in the capital who have spent their lives learning how vessels die, Luo said. You have spent one afternoon learning how not to. He was right. Experience remained decisive. The system could label the spear and still leave me under it. Immortality could name the ways I died and still not move steel 1 inch. Behind Luo, Lin Mei came out of the lane at a limping run. She was too far to reach us, but she swung the rescue rope overhead. The broken metal hook tied to its end struck a blue patch, scattering cold mud across Luo's back. He turned his head. Not much. Enough. I slapped the spear point sideways, rolled through the red-blue steam, and came up on one knee. The drag tore skin from my palm. Opposing essence crawled into the cut and made my fingers twitch against my will. Core disruption increasing. Recommended action, disengage. Disengaging meant giving Luo the dragon corpse and time to rebuild his weapon. Not acceptable. He reset his stance and thrust again, faster, aiming through my left lung toward the azure core. I used wind step. 20 essence vanished. Cold wind kicked me sideways. The spear passed where my chest had been and cut a line through the air that made both cores convulse. Not hit. Near hit. My knees weakened anyway. Current essence, 28. Wind step ended. Luo reversed with a sweeping hook. I raised the axe. The hook caught it, and the new blue-red sinew bit through the metal head. My axe split in two. For half a second, grief hit me harder than the wound. That axe had come with me from home. It had been a tool, a lifeline, a piece of the world where I knew my job. Crimson seized the grief and turned it toward rage. Let me. Azure seized it and turned it toward cold. Release attachment. No. I threw the broken axe handle at Luo's face. He flinched. I closed. Without the axe, I had hands. Hands are enough if you can reach. His spear had reach, but his wrist was broken, his left-hand grip was worse, and perception showed every dip of the point. I slipped inside the next thrust and caught the shaft under my right arm. The sinew burned through my coat. Opposing dragon power crawled toward my ribs like teeth. I spent 5 essence on Ember Fist and 5 on Mending Breath together, not as a technique the system had named, but as a desperate balance: heat outward, cold inward, burn the weapon, keep the flesh from opening. Current essence, 18. Balance strain severe. My vision split blue and red. The 2 dragons shoved against each other, and for one breath I was not sure whose hand held the spear. Lin Mei's voice cut across the field. Chen Kai. Again. My name. I drove my knee into Luo's broken wrist. He screamed and lost the shaft. I turned the spear away from both of us and rammed the point into the mud where blue and red dragon blood mixed. The opposing sinews writhed. Steam burst. The red bead cracked. Luo tried to tackle me. He was still strong. Still trained. Still dangerous. I was tired enough that his shoulder drove me backward into the azure dragon's scale. Pain exploded through my spine. He clawed for the cracked bead. If he reached it, the collars might wake again. The corpses might twitch. The campaign might not end here. So I did something the system did not reward and no dragon advised. I bit his left hand. He howled. I spat blood, hooked his elbow, and dropped my weight. His left arm folded. Lin Mei arrived with the rescue rope, looped his ankles, and pulled as 2 villagers hit him from behind with poles. Luo went face first into the mud. I put my knee between his shoulders and wrapped the rope around both wrists, broken and unbroken. Then I took the cracked red bead and crushed it under a stone. Every black thread in Willowbank snapped. Hostile commander defeated. Dragon essence gained, 40. Current essence, 58. Enemy harvest operation disrupted. No one would harvest Willowbank's dragon corpses today. I almost collapsed on top of him. Crimson whispered, now kill him. Azure whispered, interrogate him. I tied the knot tighter. He lives until we learn who sent him. Neither dragon liked that. Good. Silence after a fight is never silent. Willowbank had burning roofs hissing under wet blankets, wounded people groaning, freed thralls sobbing as they returned to bodies that felt wrong, children hiccuping after fear, soldiers dropping weapons when villagers pointed farm hooks at them, and 2 dead dragons cooling at the edge of everything. But no house was spreading flame. The grain store stood. The well was clear. The wounded were breathing. Captain Luo was tied to a post with 3 knots. Lin Mei checked herself. Willowbank had survived. Not untouched. Not clean. Survived. I sat with my back against the grain store wall and tried to make my hands stop shaking. The system hovered at the edge of sight. Chen Kai. Level, 1. Body, 8. Speed, 6. Spirit, 3. Perception, 6. Will, 8. Current essence, 58. Azure Reserve, 15. Crimson Reserve, 15. Unassigned essence, 28. Core pressure, unreadable. I could see what fuel sat where. I could not see which dragon stood closer to my hands. The 2 disasters in my chest felt equally annoyed, but feeling was not a meter. Technique strain, moderate. Injuries: punctured thigh stabilized, rib fracture, shoulder tear stabilized, left forearm arrow wound stabilized, side cut, back muscle tearing, palm abrasion, opposing energy burn, blood loss, eye strain. Recommended: rest, food, water, balanced essence integration. Now you recommend rest, I muttered. Lin Mei crouched in front of me. She held what remained of my axe head. The hook side had split where Luo's spear bit through. The red paint was scorched black. She offered it like a funeral object. I took it carefully. Thank you. She pointed at herself. Lin Mei. Chen Kai. She repeated it, better this time, then pointed at the tied captain and made a cutting motion across her throat. Not yet, I said. She frowned. I pointed at Luo, then the ridge, then the direction the soldiers had come from. I made the shape of writing on my palm. Information. Her eyes narrowed. She understood enough to dislike it and accept it. The old man limped over with 2 villagers supporting him. He had a bloodied cloth tied around his cheek. His bad knee was worse. He still carried himself like the village leaned on his spine. He spoke slowly. The system did not translate every word, only enough sense through the cores. Willowbank owes life. I shook my head. You fought. He studied me, then looked at the freed thralls. Some were strangers. Some, judging by the cries around them, were missing people from nearby farms. One woman held a former wolfman and kept saying a name until he answered. The old man pointed at the corpses of the dragons, then at my chest. What are you? That was a fair question. I did not have a fair answer. A man, I said first. Crimson made a disgusted sound. Azure remained silent, which somehow felt worse. I touched my ribs. With a problem. Lin Mei gave a short laugh. It turned into a cough. We searched the soldiers before anything else. Not because I wanted loot. Because any scene with unexploded hazards stays dangerous. They had spare collar pins, 2 clay fire jars, 3 bundles of black thread talismans, and a waxed leather packet Luo had kept inside his armor. Lin Mei opened the packet with her reed knife's broken stump. Inside were route marks, village names, numbers, and a seal pressed in dark red wax. I could not read the characters, but the system translated fragments when I focused. Willowbank, Dragonfall response. Witness purge of cores present. Reed Ferry, labor stock. South Bank, grain penalty. Black Reed Fort, delivery. Royal exception, if twin vessel signs appear, capture alive. Notify Whitesword Inspector. There it was. The raid was part of a chain. There were tally marks beside the names. Not troop counts. People counts. Adult men, adult women, children, usable injured, spirit weak, spirit reactive. A second column listed grain estimates after fire. A third marked which villages had wells deep enough for winter holding pens. I had seen inspection forms in my own world, occupancy limits, hazardous material tags, evacuation diagrams. Paper can save lives when honest hands use it. This paper was the opposite. It made cruelty portable. A captain could die, another could take his packet, and the method would continue because the boxes were already drawn. Lin Mei traced one village name with her thumb, then looked toward the south road. The system translated when Eldershin spoke it aloud. Her aunt lives there. Of course she did. Maps are never abstract to the people on them. The local harvest was stopped. The chain remained. Eldershin saw the seal and spat into the mud. Regent's shadow, he said. Lin Mei looked toward the road. I felt the same thing. A pressure beyond the village, bigger than Luo's cruelty. Not a dragon's aura. Politics. Army. Law with teeth. Willowbank had survived its first attack. We had also pulled a cord tied to a much larger bell. Before that bell answered, people needed help. I spent essence carefully. Mending breath for the worst bleeding, 1 5-point stabilization pulse for a child with a deep claw cut, 1 for the arrow wound in a farmer's calf, and 1 for the ox bearer whose collar had torn flesh from his spine. Each partial use slowed danger without completing treatment. Each left cold in my bones. Azure approved too much, so I matched 1 5-point crimson spent by heating clean water in a cracked pot with ember fist until it steamed. Practical, balanced, exhausting. The villagers watched the water steam from my hand. Boil, I said, pointing to wounds, cloth, water. Clean. I did not know if germ theory translated through dragon magic. I knew dirty cloth killed people after rescue. So I showed them. Lin Mei watched closely and began ordering others before I finished. The freed ox bearer was the hardest. His name, I learned through broken translation and repetition, was gone. He had been a cart driver from Reed Ferry before Luo's men took him for road labor. The collar wounds along his spine opened and closed wrong, as if the corruption had taught the flesh bad habits. Mending breath could slow bleeding, but when I pushed too much azure through him, his lips turned blue and his pulse fluttered. Azure said, cease. Low survival chance. Dawn's hand closed around my sleeve. He was too weak to speak, but his eyes moved toward a woman kneeling beside him. Wife or sister, I did not know. Someone who needed one more attempt. Crimson said, burn the rot out. That sounded like a way to kill him faster. So I did neither cleanly. I heated water, cooled the swelling around the spine, and made Lin Mei hold a cloth between my hand and the wound so the technique did not pour straight into him. Human buffer. Human judgment. Slow work. It cost more time than essence, which made both dragons impatient. Dawn lived through the next 10 breaths. Then the next 10. That was all medicine ever promised in a disaster, the next 10 breaths, earned again and again. Good. If I disappeared tomorrow, that knowledge stayed. By late afternoon, Willowbank smelled of wet ash, blood, boiled cloth, and dragon rain. A thin drizzle had begun to fall from a sky with no clouds directly overhead. It came mostly over the azure dragon's body, soft and cold. Steam still rose from the crimson dragon's trench. The two weather systems met above the village and made the air shimmer. I wanted to sleep for 12 hours. Instead, I let Eldershin, Lin Mei, and 3 others lead me through the damage. That was not politeness. It was command reality. You cannot protect what you do not inspect. House 1, roof gone, family alive, grain jar cracked but salvageable. House 2, wall collapsed, 1 broken leg, cooking hearth intact. Western Lane, 6 roofs burned, no spread to the oil shed because 2 old women had smothered sparks with wet quilts. Well, clean after we pulled out roof tiles. Irrigation bank, broken by dragon impact, fixable before night if enough hands worked. Grain store, scorched door, contents dry. Dragon corpses, dangerous, valuable, impossible to ignore. Prisoners, 7 core hunters alive, 2 badly wounded, Captain Luo tied separately, freed corrupted victims under watch but not bound like animals. Deaths, none among the villagers. Broken bones, burns, blood loss, and several people who might still die without care, but every Willowbank heart still beat when we counted. That last point mattered. 1 soldier spat at a freed wolf thrall and called him meat. I did not need translation for the tone. Lin Mei struck the soldier across the mouth with a bamboo rod before I moved. The old man said something sharp. The villagers shifted, and the soldier looked down. Not my village. Their justice first. But the dragon corpses were my problem because the cores inside me reacted whenever anyone came within 10 steps of them. Azure wanted rights. Crimson wanted pyres. The villagers wanted the bodies gone before more hunters arrived. All 3 were reasonable in different ways, which made the answer harder. Dragon eyes showed residual essence in scales, teeth, sinew, and blood pools. Unstable dragon remains. Harvest risk, extreme. Corruption attraction, rising after sunset. Of course, I said. Additional warning, residual corpse essence may spawn lesser corruptions under blood moon, storm surge, mass death, or hostile ritual. Define lesser. No answer. I had learned to hate silent manuals. Azure gave the answer in its own way. Scavengers will come first. Then men. Men are worse. Crimson rumbled agreement. Beasts eat flesh. Men bottle power and call it order. That was the second time the dragons agreed, and it still did not comfort me. Lin Mei tilted her head. I pointed to the corpses, then made claws with both hands and pointed toward the hills. More. She understood enough to go still. We needed a perimeter. Not heroic. Boring. Necessary. I drew in mud with a stick, village, roads, stream, ridge, dragon bodies. Then I marked watches. 2 people per roof. Sling stones ready. Wet cloth masks. No one alone. Children and wounded in the grain store because it had thick walls. Prisoners bound away from the wounded. Freed thralls watched kindly but firmly in case corruption returned. Water jars at every lane. Tools stacked by doorways. Signal fires prepared but not lit unless needed. Eldershin listened, asked questions I partly understood, then changed 3 placements because he knew the footpaths better than I did. I let his changes stand. He knew these paths, I did not. Lin Mei took over the roof teams. She moved fast, limping from her fall but refusing help. When a boy argued, she pointed at the broken collar pile and said one sentence that shut him up. I guessed it meant something like, "You saw what happened to people who waited." While they worked, I examined the system options. Available upgrades. Level integration incomplete. Essence may be stabilized toward next level after rest. Technique practice required for reliable wind step. Mending breath may be improved, reduced cold shock, 30 essence, azure favor +2. Ember fist may be improved, longer heat channel, 30 essence, crimson favor +2. The rest of the interface remained clouded. I could feel the dragons leaning against my choices, but no clean meter told me how close either one stood to my hands. That knowledge, if it existed, would have to be earned later. Current essence remained 38. Lin Mei called my name from the roof. I looked up. She held up Luo's waxed packet and pointed to the southern road. More marks there. More villages. Black Reed Fort. A delivery route. Protecting Willowbank meant warning the next village, stopping the fort, and breaking the collar chain before it came back with uniforms and legal orders. I touched the broken axe head at my belt. I will not leave you to this, I said. Promises spoken after battle are easy. I made myself remember that keeping one would be harder. No one understood all the words. Eldershin understood the posture. He pressed his fist to his palm and bowed just enough to make me uncomfortable. I returned it badly. Crimson mocked me for bowing to farmers. Azure said nothing, but I felt its attention sharpen. Human bonds, apparently, were also a countermeasure. The dogs started barking at dusk. Not one dog. Every dog in Willowbank, from the old yellow one under the milk cart to the 3 half-grown pups near the grain store. They faced the southern road with their hackles up and tails low. The village went quiet in pieces. First the roof teams. Then the bucket line at the irrigation bank. Then the freed thralls, who seemed to smell something the rest of us could not. Captain Luo heard the dogs and began laughing softly through swollen lips. Lin Mei looked at me. I looked at the road. Dragon eyes opened. Gold. Not a person. Not a stat line. A wall of gold so bright it burned the sight out of me. I shut it down too late. Pain punched behind my eyes. Blood ran from my nose again. Level concealed by superior art. Do not contest. Good advice, I whispered. A woman in white robes stood beyond the gate. She looked no older than 30, but silver ran through black hair bound high with a plain jade pin. A straight sword floated beside her shoulder without hand or scabbard. Her robes had no mud on the hem despite the road. Behind her, cavalry emerged from the dusk in ranks, scale armor catching firelight. 50 riders. 100. More behind the willows. This was not Luo's raiding party. This was the answer to the bell we had rung. The villagers lifted tools. I raised one hand, palm down. Hold. A bucket line cannot stop cavalry in open ground. Sling stones cannot solve a floating sword. We needed seconds, not pride. The woman studied the village. Her gaze moved from the wet roofs to the unburned grain store, from the freed thralls to the broken collars, from Captain Luo tied at the well to the 2 dragon corpses beyond the fields. She saw too much too fast. When her eyes reached me, the sword beside her turned a fraction, point lowering. Luo forced himself upright against the post. Inspector Zhao, he called. The vessel is unstable. I preserved it for the regent. The woman did not look at him. You burned a registered village under emergency pretext, she said. Her voice was calm. The translation slid into my mind like a blade through water. Luo's smile twitched. Dragonfall Protocol. Requires witness holding, not witness purge. That line changed the air. Some of the soldiers behind her looked toward Luo. Not kindly. So she was not here as his friend. That did not make her mine. She stepped through the gate. Every rider stayed outside. Disciplined. Waiting. She did not cross the threshold blindly. 2 fingers lowered at her side, and the floating sword traced a small circle. Gold light skimmed the ground ahead of her. It touched Luo's discarded collar pins first. Each one rose from the mud, spun once, and dropped into a neat line. Then the light found the black thread talismans. They tried to curl away like burned insects. Her sword pinned all 3 bundles to the ground without touching them. Containment residue confirmed, said a cavalry officer outside the gate. Record it, she answered. The officer opened a wax tablet. Another rider dismounted and approached the freed thralls, carrying no drawn weapon. He knelt beside Gon, inspected the torn wounds along his spine, and looked back toward Luo with his mouth set hard. This army had arrived ready to cage me. It had also arrived with procedures for the thing Luo had done. That distinction mattered. It did not make the procedures merciful. It meant there were rules inside the threat, and rules gave me something to push against. Luo understood that too. They were contaminated stock, he said. My field authority permits conversion when transport is impossible. The inspector's gaze moved to Gon's human face. Was he condemned by a magistrate? Luo said nothing. Was he registered as a cultivator volunteer? Nothing. Was his family compensated under the corruption levy? His silence became an answer 3 times over. Gon's hand tightened around the wet cloth at his chest. The woman beside him, his wife, I thought now rose to her knees and spoke so rapidly the system could not translate more than pieces. Road labor. Taken at Reed Ferry. Son hidden. 3 men died. The inspector listened without interruption. When the woman finished, Zhao turned to the wax tablet officer. Record her claim under oath. Mark Reed Ferry for sealed inquiry. Lin Mei took 1 step forward. She held Luo's waxed packet above her head. The movement made 3 cavalry archers raise their bows. I put my arm across her path before they reached full draw. She gave me an irritated look, then tossed the packet into the open ground between us and the inspector. Zhao's sword moved. The packet opened in midair. Gold light passed over the route papers. Zhao's calm cracked around the eyes. She recognized the seal. "Where did you obtain these?" she asked. Lin Mei pointed at Luo. The inspector finally looked at him. Luo straightened against the post despite the broken wrist and rope burns. "Operational tallies. Authorized through Black Reed Fort. This seal authorizes Dragonfall containment," Zhao said. "It does not authorize child inventory. The frontier survives by using what the capital refuses to see. The capital sees this now." Her sword flicked. The papers folded themselves and settled into the officer's evidence case. Luo's face changed then. Not fear of punishment. Fear of losing ownership of the story. "Inspector, the stranger has both cores. Every breath you spend questioning procedure gives it time to root. It's not he. Not even prisoner." Zhao looked back at me, and whatever anger Luo had stirred disappeared behind professional control. "He is correct about one fact," she said. "If you carry what the field reports claim, time is dangerous." "For whom?" "Everyone within the distance you can cross before we stop you. Honest, at least." She lifted her left hand. Gold characters formed between her fingers, thin as wire. "Do not activate a technique. Do not approach the dragon remains. Do not permit either spirit to speak through your mouth. If any condition is broken, my sword severs your head before your course can answer." Bounded immortality, demonstrated as policy. The crimson dragon pressed against my ribs, delighted by the challenge. Azure withdrew into a cold watchfulness that felt almost as dangerous. "And if I obey?" I asked. "I determine whether Qinkai still exists inside the vessel." That was the first time she used my name. Not kindly. Precisely. Lin Mei said something sharp beside me. The translation gave only, "He saved us." Zhao answered her directly. "So have floodgates. We still inspect them for cracks." Lin Mei's jaw set. "A man is not a gate," Eldershan said. The translation came clean because he spoke slowly. The inspector studied him. "No. A broken gate cannot choose where the flood goes." There it was, not contempt. Fear shaped into law. Lin Mei moved to my right with her sling hidden behind her leg. Eldershan stood on my left, leaning on his pole. The cleaver woman took two children by the shoulders and pushed them behind the grain store wall. "Good. Everyone's still thinking." The inspector stopped 10 paces away. "Name," she said. "Chen Kai." Her eyes flicked, perhaps at the foreign shape of it. "Origin." "Far away." The floating sword hummed. Azure whispered, "Do not reveal displacement." Crimson whispered, "Challenge her." I ignored both. Farther than I know how to explain. She accepted that as either honesty or a better lie than she expected. "Did you take both cores willingly?" I touched both dragons because men with collars were coming. "That is not an answer. It is the answer I have." Her gaze lowered to my chest. The cores reacted. Blue cold behind the left lung. Red heat behind the right. For one awful second, I felt the inspector's power brush the edges of them like a hand testing a locked door. Possession pressure detected. External scan detected. Soul attack, not active. Will contested. I stood still. Fireground rule, do not jerk when someone checks an injury unless jerking saves you. I let her see enough to know I was not hiding a drawn blade. I did not open the door. Her face changed. Not surprise. Fear. That frightened me more than Luo's hunger. Greedy men fear losing prizes. Professionals fear known disasters. She lowered herself to one knee. Every villager inhaled at once. The cavalry outside the gate shifted but did not break rank. Inspector Zhao bowed her head. "The forbidden twin dragon vessel has returned." The words settled over Willowbank heavier than smoke. Forbidden. Not chosen. Not blessed. Forbidden. I looked at Lin Mei. She had understood at least one word from the way everyone reacted. Her fingers tightened around the sling. I said, "If you are kneeling, why does your army look ready to charge?" Inspector Zhao rose. "Because reverence and containment are not opposites." The floating sword turned toward my heart. The fair thing would have been a duel. That was my exhausted brain talking. Stories like duels. Armies like certainty. Inspector Zhao had brought cavalry, cultivator seals, archers, and enough discipline to close every road out of Willowbank before saying my name twice. She raised 2 fingers. A golden flare climbed into the dusk. Riders moved at once. Not a wild charge. They spread with practiced spacing, 10 toward the north ridge, 20 along the stream, another rank to the western lane, more circling behind the grain store. Nets came down from saddle hooks. Long poles capped with pale talismans pointed toward me. Archers knocked but did not draw fully. This was not massacre formation. It was capture formation. Dragon eyes flickered despite the pain. Royal Containment Cavalry. Level 3 to 5. Anti-vessel nets, restraint, essence drain. Pole talismans, core disruption. Whitesword Inspector Zhao Yulan. Level concealed. Gold affinity. Threat extreme. I shut my eyes for half a second. When I opened them, the world was still bad. Lin Mei stepped closer. Chen Kai. She said my name like a question and an anchor. I wanted to tell her to run. Bad order. Roads closed. Cavalry fast. If the village ran, people died. If I fought here, people died. If I surrendered wrong, maybe everyone died later. Captain Luo laughed from the post. Alive, vessel. Not unharmed. Inspector Zhao's sword flashed. The rope around Luo's post split. So did the front of his armor. He froze as a red line opened under his chin, shallow but exact. Captain Luo, she said, you will speak when asked by the court, if your tongue remains useful. He shut his mouth. Again, not my friend. Not his either. Law with a blade. I raised my empty hands. Crimson erupted. No. Heat flooded my right side. My fingers curled. Every mounted soldier looked breakable. Every roadblock looked burnable. For one breath, I saw myself charging through them, tearing nets apart, making the army kneel because fear was faster than trust. Azure answered with cold. Submit temporarily. Preserve the vessel. Abandon the village if required. There it was. The two dragon answers, dominate or detach. Neither was mine. I looked at the village. The grain store stood because people had fought for it. The free thralls breathed because we had broken collars instead of skulls. Eldershin leaned on his pole, one old man who had refused to be carried away from his own lane. Lin Mei stood with a sling against an army because she had not learned the trick of being helpless. My promise had been Willowbank first. The raid was over. The danger was not. The next promise formed with hard edges: survive capture, keep the village from punishment, learn the chain behind the collars, and break it at Blackreed Fort or wherever the region's shadow led. I spoke slowly, hoping the system would carry enough meaning. No one in this village is to be harmed for helping me defend it. Inspector Zhao watched me. You are in no position to set terms. Then hear facts. Luo burned roofs, collared people, and tried to harvest dragon corpses. Your own protocol says witness holding, not witness purge. The villagers stopped corruption from spreading. If your law punishes that, your law works for the collars. The cavalry heard. The villagers heard. Luo heard. I wanted Zhao to know I knew the difference between her and him, and that everyone else did too. Her expression did not soften. But she turned her head slightly. Scribe. A writer near the gate opened a wax tablet. Record Willowbank under provisional royal protection pending inquiry. No seizure of grain. No punishment without inspector seal. Wounded to receive field treatment. The old man exhaled. Not victory. A held door. Zhao looked back at me. Now kneel. Crimson laughed, vast and furious. Azure whispered, kneel outside. Stand inside. For once, that was almost useful. I lowered myself to one knee because my leg was half ruined and because keeping villagers alive mattered more than my pride. I did not bow my head. The first net flew. It opened in the air, pale cords shining with gold characters. When it touched my shoulders, both cores clenched. Essence drained like heat from wet skin. Current essence, 38. 31. 24. I gritted my teeth. Lin Mei raised her sling. No, I said. She froze. I met her eyes. Live. Watch. Maybe she understood only the shape. It was enough. She lowered the sling by 1 inch, not in surrender, but in promise. 2 pole talismans touched my back. Pain speared through both cores. My vision split blue and red. Azure hissed. Crimson roared. For a second, the spirits pushed so hard against their cages that my hand shook inside the net. External seal pressure rising. Host control threatened. Named anchor recommended. I focused on my name. Chen Kai. Firefighter. Former amateur Sonda. 28. Warehouse roof. Boy under my arm. Willowbank. Lin May. Eldershan. People are not fuel. The pressure eased by a hair. Inspector Zhao stepped close enough that only I could hear her next words clearly. If you lose balance inside a city, thousands die. Then help me not lose it. Something unreadable crossed her face. Then she lifted her voice for the army, the village, Luo, the freed thralls, and the dead dragons. By command of the regent, Chen Kai is to be captured alive. The cavalry closed around me. Gold cords tightened. My knees sank into Willowbank mud. Lin Mei stood beyond the net with blood on her cheek and firelight in her eyes. Eldershan's hand rested on her shoulder, holding her back or holding himself upright. I did not know this world. I did not know its court, its armies, its roads, its gods, or whether I would ever see 2026 again. But I knew the weight of a rescue line. One end meant nothing unless someone held the other. Willowbank was holding mine, and capture would not make me let go. I knew one thing. The people who built collars had made a mistake when they left witnesses alive. They had left me a village. They had left me names. They had left me a promise. And as the royal army carried me out of Willowbank under a sky still bruised blue and red, the two dragons in my chest finally fell silent long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat.